Two homeless twins, a stern judge, and an unexpected bond that changes all their lives. When the past collides with the present, a shocking revelation at the courtroom could redefine what it truly means to be a family. The winter wind howled as Judge Owen Mercer navigated the icy streets on his way home from a long day in court. The city was unusually quiet, the typical hustle and bustle muted by the biting cold. Owen tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his mind still lingering on the difficult case he had presided over that day. Justice was his life's work, but it was also a heavy burden, one that often left him drained and alone. As he approached an intersection near the downtown bus station, something caught his eye. Two small figures huddled together on a bench, their heads bent against the wind. At first, Owen thought they were simply waiting for a late-night bus, but as he slowed down, the scene came into sharper focus. The children, two boys, no older than 10, were shivering in their threadbare coats, their arms wrapped tightly around each other. Concern replaced his fatigue, and Owen pulled his car to the curb. He stepped out, the cold biting through his own thick overcoat, and approached the boys cautiously. "Hey there," he said gently, keeping his tone as non-threatening as possible. "What are you doing out here so late?" The boys looked up, their identical faces pale and gaunt. One of them, the quieter of the two, seemed hesitant to speak. The other, braver or perhaps simply more desperate, squared his shoulders and met Owen's gaze. "We're fine," the boy said, his voice trembling. "We're waiting for the bus." Owen glanced at the empty street and the station's darkened windows. There were no buses running at this hour, and he suspected the boys knew that. "It's freezing out here," he said. "Where's your family? Can I call someone for you?" The quieter boy shook his head, his grip tightening on the other's arm. "We don't have anyone," he murmured, barely audible over the wind. Owen's heart clenched at the words. He crouched down to their level, trying to make himself less imposing. "What are your names?" he asked. "I'm Malachi," said the braver one. "And this is my brother, Isaiah." Twins, Owen realized, studying their identical features. Despite their ragged clothes and thin faces, there was a quiet strength in their eyes, a resilience that spoke of hardship far beyond their years. "How long have you been out here?" Owen asked. Malachi hesitated, exchanging a glance with Isaiah. "Since she passed away," he admitted finally. The words hit Owen like a blow. He had seen plenty of cases involving neglected or abandoned children, but meeting them face to face like this was different. It was raw, personal, and impossible to ignore. "Come on," he said, standing and extending a hand. "You can't stay out here. Let me take you somewhere warm." Isaiah shrank back, clutching Malachi's arm, but Malachi studied Owen carefully, as though weighing his options. "You're not gonna call the cops, are you?" he asked, suspicion edging his voice. "No," Owen assured him. "I'm not here to get you in trouble. I just want to help." After a long pause, Malachi nodded, and the two boys stood. Owen led them to his car, cranking the heat as soon as they were inside. He stopped at a diner on the way home, ordering hot chocolate and sandwiches for the boys. They ate quickly, their hunger evident, but Malachi kept one eye on Owen the entire time, as though ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "Where are we going?" Isaiah asked quietly as they got back in the car. "To my house," Owen said. "Just for tonight. We'll figure everything else out in the morning." The boys didn't respond, but neither did they protest. When they arrived at Owen's modest home, he showed them to the guest room, where he had hurriedly pulled extra blankets out of the closet. It wasn't much, but it was warm and safe. Malachi stood in the doorway, watching as Isaiah climbed into the bed. "Why are you helping us?" he asked, his voice laced with both suspicion and curiosity. Owen hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. "Because someone needs to. And because I've been lucky enough in my life to be in a position to help. That's all." Malachi didn't respond, but after a long pause, he nodded and climbed into bed beside his brother. Owen turned off the light and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment as he processed the events of the evening. He hadn't planned for this. He had never expected to find two boys, cold and alone, in the middle of the city. But as he stood in the quiet hallway, he realized he couldn't walk away now. These boys needed someone, and maybe, just maybe, he needed them too. The morning light streamed through the blinds as Owen brewed a pot of coffee in the kitchen, his thoughts preoccupied with the two boys asleep in the guest room. He hadn't slept much, his mind racing with questions and concerns. Who were these boys? How long had they been on the streets? And most pressing of all, what could he do to help them? The smell of bacon sizzling in the pan eventually coaxed Isaiah and Malachi out of the guest room. Owen looked up from the stove to see the two boys hovering in the doorway, their identical faces wearing expressions of cautious curiosity. Isaiah's hair was tousled, and Malachi clutched his brother's sleeve, as if unsure whether to step further into the room. "Good morning," Owen said warmly, keeping his tone light. "I hope you're hungry. I made bacon, eggs, and toast." Malachi's eyes darted to the food, but he didn't move until Isaiah took a hesitant step forward. "Thank you," Isaiah murmured, his voice so soft it was almost a whisper. Owen gestured to the small dining table. "Sit down, boys. Eat as much as you want." They hesitated, then slowly took their seats. Malachi eyed the plate in front of him as though it might disappear, while Isaiah picked at his toast before finally giving in and taking a bite. Watching them, Owen felt a pang in his chest. It was clear these boys weren't used to such simple comforts, and the realization hit him harder than he expected. After a few minutes of silent eating, Owen decided to break the ice. "So," he began, leaning back in his chair, "why don't you tell me a little about yourselves?" Malachi glanced at Isaiah, his jaw tightening as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke. "There's not much to tell," he said. "Our mom died a couple of months ago. After that, we didn't have anywhere to go." Owen nodded, careful not to press too hard. "What about your father? Or other family members? Is there anyone I can contact for you?" Isaiah shook his head, his voice trembling. "We don't have a dad. Mom said he left before we were born. And we don't know any of her family." Malachi straightened in his chair, his tone defensive. "We've been fine on our own." Owen studied the boy's face, seeing the defiance there. Malachi was trying to protect his brother, Owen realized, but beneath the bravado was a child who had been forced to grow up far too quickly. "I can see that," Owen said gently. "You've done a good job taking care of each other. But living on the streets isn't a long-term solution. You need help." Isaiah looked down at his plate, and Malachi crossed his arms. "We don't need a shelter," Malachi said firmly. "We've been to those before. They don't care about kids like us." Owen sighed, leaning forward. "I'm not talking about sending you to a shelter," he said. "I want to help you find something better, something stable." Malachi raised an eyebrow. "Why do you care? You don't even know us." Owen hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because I've seen too many kids fall through the cracks of the system. I don't want that to happen to you. You deserve better." The boys didn't respond right away, but the tension in the room seemed to ease slightly. They finished their breakfast in silence, and Owen cleared the plates, giving them a moment to process. After breakfast, Owen decided to show the boys around his home, hoping to make them feel more comfortable. He led them to the small study filled with bookshelves and stacks of papers. "This is where I work when I'm not in the courtroom," he explained. "I'm a judge." Malachi's eyes narrowed. "A judge? Like, in court?" "That's right," Owen said. "I make decisions about cases, sometimes to help people in difficult situations." "Does that mean you can decide what happens to us?" Isaiah asked quietly, his eyes wide. Owen knelt to meet the boy's gaze. "No," he said firmly. That's not how this works. I'm here to help you, not to make decisions for you. But I'll need your trust to figure out the best way forward. Isaiah nodded hesitantly, while Malachi remained guarded. Owen couldn't blame them. Trust wasn't something these boys had likely experienced much of in their young lives. But he was determined to show them they weren't alone anymore. That afternoon, Owen made a few phone calls to contacts he trusted, trying to get advice on how to handle the situation. He spoke with Hazel Whitmore, a longtime friend and attorney specializing in family law. You need to consider fostering them, Hazel suggested. If you send them back into the system, there's no guarantee they'll be placed in a stable environment. Owen frowned, the thought weighing heavily on him. I've never been a parent before, Hazel. I don't know if I'm the right person for this. No one's ever ready, Owen, Hazel said. But you're a good man, and you clearly care about these boys. That's more than most kids in their situation get. Later that evening, Owen sat with Isaiah and Malachi in the living room, the television playing quietly in the background. I've been thinking, he said, breaking the silence. If it's all right with you, I'd like you to stay here for a while. Just until we figure out a more permanent solution. Isaiah looked at Malachi, who studied Owen intently. Finally, Malachi shrugged. Better than the streets, he said. I guess we can stay. Owen smiled, relief washing over him. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As the boys settled in for the night, Owen couldn't help but feel that this chance encounter was about to change all their lives in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The next morning, the house began to feel a little less like Owen's solitary retreat and more like a bustling home. He woke up to the sound of laughter, light, unrestrained, and distinctly boyish. It came from the kitchen, where he found Malachi rifling through the cereal cabinet while Isaiah sat at the table sketching in a notebook. Good morning, Owen greeted, startled but not unpleasantly so by the scene. He wasn't used to noise in the mornings, or at any time, really. For years, the only sounds in his house had been the occasional creak of floorboards or the hum of the fridge. Now it was alive. Morning. Malachi chirped, holding up a box of sugary cereal. You've got the good stuff. Can we have this? Owen smirked. You don't strike me as the kind of kid who waits for permission, Malachi. Malachi grinned, unrepentant. Guess not, he said as he poured 2 bowls, milk splashing generously. Isaiah looked up from his notebook, his expression softer, more reserved. Thank you for letting us stay, he said quietly. We really didn't have anywhere else to go. Owen felt a tug in his chest at the boy's sincerity. You're welcome, he replied. This house was too quiet anyway. I think it needed a bit of chaos. Malachi snorted. You'll regret saying that soon enough. After breakfast, Owen noticed Isaiah carefully placing his sketchbook back into his backpack. Curious, Owen asked, what are you working on in there, Isaiah? Isaiah hesitated, glancing at his brother. Malachi nudged him. Show him, he encouraged. It's really good. Reluctantly, Isaiah pulled out the notebook and handed it over. Owen flipped through the pages, his eyebrows raising as he saw intricate drawings of buildings, bridges, and even a few fantasy-style castles. Each one was detailed, with clean lines and imaginative designs. These are incredible, Owen said, genuinely impressed. Do you want to be an architect someday? Isaiah nodded shyly. I like designing things. It's kind of like escaping. I can make the world however I want it to be. That's a gift, Owen said. Not everyone has the vision to create something new. You should keep working on this. Maybe I can even get you some better supplies. Isaiah's face lit up at the suggestion, and Owen realized how rare it was for the boy to receive encouragement. Malachi, not one to let the moment linger too seriously, clapped his hands. Great! You can design buildings, and I'll live in them for free. Sounds like a plan, right? Isaiah rolled his eyes but smiled. Sure, Malachi. That's exactly how it works. Later that day, Owen took the boys on a trip to the local mall. It wasn't a grand outing, but he wanted to get them some essentials, clothes, shoes, and maybe a few things to help them feel more at home. At the department store, Malachi darted between racks of colorful shirts, declaring that he was going to pick the coolest outfit ever. Isaiah, meanwhile, hovered near Owen, unsure what to choose. You don't have to pick anything fancy, Owen said, kneeling so he was at the boy's eye level. Just grab whatever feels comfortable. Isaiah hesitated. Mom used to buy all our clothes, he said softly. I don't really know what I like. Owen's heart ached at the admission. Well, how about this, he said. We'll try a little bit of everything until you find your style. Sound good? Isaiah nodded, and soon he was sorting through racks alongside Malachi, both boys laughing as they tried on oversized hats and mismatched shoes. By the time they left the store, Owen was carrying bags of clothes and supplies, and the boys were chatting animatedly about their choices. As they drove home, Malachi suddenly asked, "Why are you doing all this for us? You don't even know us." Owen glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Because sometimes life gives you an opportunity to do the right thing, he said. And I didn't want to ignore it. Malachi seemed to mull over the answer, while Isaiah stared out the window, his sketchbook balanced on his knees. Owen realized that while their gratitude was genuine, the boys were still wary. They had been let down before, and trust didn't come easily. But he was determined to show them that he wasn't going anywhere. That evening, as the boys settled into the guest room, Owen knocked lightly on the door. "How are you two holding up?" he asked. Malachi shrugged. "Better than the streets." Isaiah looked up from his sketchbook. "It's nice here," he admitted. "It feels safe." "That's the goal," Owen said, leaning against the doorframe. "If there's anything else you need, just let me know." Isaiah hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we'll have to leave soon?" Owen's chest tightened. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. "For now, let's just take it one day at a time." "Okay." Isaiah nodded, and Malachi, ever the practical one, added, "All right. But fair warning, we eat a lot." Owen chuckled. Noted. As he walked back to his room that night, Owen couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear: Isaiah and Malachi had brought something into his life that had been missing for a long time. And he was starting to realize he needed them just as much as they needed him. Owen Mercer's home had become a place of warmth and noise, something he hadn't realized he was missing until Isaiah and Malachi entered his life. The boys were settling in well, their initial wariness giving way to laughter and trust. Yet, Owen knew that their current arrangement wasn't sustainable. If he wanted to provide them with true stability, he needed to take the next step. Late one evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Owen sat at his desk, staring at the paperwork Hazel had sent over earlier that day. It was the beginning of the foster application process, a lengthy, bureaucratic mountain he would need to climb if he wanted to officially take Isaiah and Malachi under his care. The thought of navigating the foster system was daunting, but Owen's resolve was firm. He couldn't imagine sending the boys back into the unknown. The next morning, he decided to have an honest conversation with the twins. Over a breakfast of pancakes and scrambled eggs, Owen cleared his throat. "I need to talk to you two about something important," he said, setting down his coffee mug. Malachi, always the more direct of the two, raised an eyebrow. "We're not in trouble, are we?" Owen chuckled. "No, nothing like that. I've been thinking about the future, your future. Right now, this is just a temporary arrangement. But if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to start the process to make it more permanent. I want to become your foster parent." The room fell silent. Isaiah stared at his plate, his fork frozen mid-air, while Malachi's face shifted from surprise to cautious hope. "You mean, you want us to stay?" Malachi asked, his tone uncertain. Yes, Owen said firmly. I don't want you to have to go through the system again. You deserve a home, not just a temporary place to stay. Isaiah finally looked up, his eyes wide and shimmering with emotion. You'd really do that for us? He asked softly. I would, Owen said. But only if that's what you both want. This decision is yours to make. The boys exchanged a long glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Malachi nodded. We want to stay, he said. Right, Isaiah? Isaiah nodded as well, a small smile breaking through his hesitation. Yeah. We want to stay. Owen's heart swelled with relief and pride. All right then, he said. It's going to take some time, and there'll be a lot of steps to go through, but we'll face it together. Deal? Deal, the boys said in unison, their smiles widening. That afternoon, Owen called Hazel to let her know he was moving forward with the application. It won't be easy, she warned him. The foster system is complicated, and you'll have to go through background checks, home visits, and interviews. But I know you, Owen, you'll handle it. Hazel wasn't exaggerating. Over the next few weeks, Owen's life became a whirlwind of forms, phone calls, and meetings with social workers. He cleaned every corner of his house, double-checked every safety measure, and prepared for the inevitable home inspection. The boys pitched in, helping him organize the guest room and even creating a chore chart to show the social worker they were responsible. When the day of the home visit arrived, Owen was nervous but prepared. The social worker, a kind but meticulous woman named Ms. Delgado, spent hours touring the house, asking questions about Owen's daily routines and his plans for the boys' education and emotional well-being. Isaiah and Malachi sat in the living room, answering her questions with a mix of honesty and charm that left Owen beaming with pride. What do you like most about living here? Ms. Delgado asked them. Isaiah thought for a moment before replying, it feels safe. Like we don't have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. Malachi, never one to miss an opportunity for humor, added, and the food's way better than the shelters. Ms. Delgado smiled, jotting down notes. Before she left, she turned to Owen. You're doing a good thing here, she said. But fostering isn't just about providing a roof over their heads. It's about being present, every day, for whatever they need. I understand, Owen said. And I'm ready for that. As the social worker drove away, Owen exhaled deeply, the weight of the day lifting slightly. He turned to the boys, who were watching him expectantly. How do you think it went? Malachi asked. I think it went well, Owen said. But we'll have to wait and see. That evening, as they sat together on the couch watching a movie, Owen realized how much had already changed. His once quiet house was now filled with laughter, arguments over popcorn, and the comforting sound of family. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Owen knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to let these boys down. They were his family now, and he was ready to fight for them. The approval process for fostering Isaiah and Malachi continued to move forward, but it wasn't without its challenges. Owen had always been confident in his abilities as a judge, but this new role, becoming a father figure, felt like entirely uncharted territory. Still, he was determined to rise to the occasion. One morning, Owen received a call from Ms. Delgado, the social worker overseeing the case. Mr. Mercer, we need to conduct one more assessment, she explained. This time, I'd like to meet with you and the boys together. It's important to evaluate the dynamics of your relationship and how well you're bonding. Owen agreed, though the thought of being evaluated made him a little uneasy. He wanted everything to go smoothly for Isaiah and Malachi's sake, but he also knew they weren't used to being under a microscope. He decided to be upfront with the boys about the meeting. That evening, after dinner, Owen sat the twins down in the living room. Ms. Delgado is coming back this week, he said. She wants to talk to all of us together. Malachi groaned dramatically, flopping back on the couch. More questions? Haven't we answered, like, a million already? Owen chuckled. It might feel that way, but this is important. She needs to make sure this is the right fit, for all of us. Isaiah, ever the quieter of the two, asked softly, what if we say something wrong? There's no wrong answer, Owen assured him. Just be honest. She's here to help, not to judge. When the day of the assessment arrived, the boys were surprisingly calm. They sat beside Owen on the couch as Ms. Delgado began her questions. She started with Owen, asking about his daily routines, how he balanced work with parenting, and what plans he had for the boys' future. I've adjusted my work schedule to make sure I'm home in the evenings, Owen explained. I've also been attending their school meetings and activities. It's been a learning curve, but I'm committed to making it work. Ms. Delgado nodded, then turned her attention to the boys. How do you feel about living with Mr. Mercer? She asked. Isaiah was the first to answer, his voice steady. It's the safest I've ever felt, he said. He listens to us, and he doesn't make us feel like a burden. Malachi added with a grin, and he makes really good pancakes. Ms. Delgado smiled at their responses, but she wasn't done yet. What's the biggest change you've noticed since moving in? She asked. Isaiah hesitated, glancing at Malachi, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. I guess, it's having someone who cares about what we do, Isaiah said. Like, when I draw, Mr. Mercer always asks to see it. He doesn't just pretend to care, he really does. Owen felt a lump rise in his throat at the boy's words. He hadn't realized how much his small gestures of support had meant to Isaiah, but hearing it now made all his efforts feel worthwhile. Malachi chimed in. And he actually keeps his promises. Most people don't. Ms. Delgado took notes as she listened, her expression thoughtful. It sounds like you've built a strong foundation here, she said finally. That's a good sign. After the meeting, Ms. Delgado stayed behind for a moment to speak privately with Owen. The boys have been through a lot, she said. But it's clear they trust you. That's not something we see often in situations like this. Thank you, Owen said. I just want them to feel like they have a home, somewhere they belong. You're doing a great job, Ms. Delgado said. But remember, the road ahead won't always be easy. They'll need your patience and understanding as they continue to heal. Later that evening, as the boys got ready for bed, Owen found Isaiah in the study, sketching quietly. He knocked lightly on the doorframe. Mind if I come in? He asked. Isaiah looked up and nodded. Sure. Owen sat beside him, watching as he worked on a detailed drawing of a futuristic cityscape. This is incredible, Owen said. Your talent blows me away every time. Isaiah smiled shyly. Thanks. After a moment of silence, Owen said, I wanted to thank you for what you said today. It means a lot to me that you feel safe here. Isaiah set down his pencil and looked at Owen. I meant it, he said. You're different from everyone else we've met. You actually care. Owen's chest tightened with emotion. I do care, Isaiah. And I'm not going anywhere. You and Malachi are stuck with me now. Isaiah chuckled softly, his shoulders relaxing. That's okay, he said. I think we're okay with that. The bond between Owen and the twins continued to grow stronger with each passing day. He attended their school events, cheered them on at basketball games, and even helped Isaiah enter a local art contest, where his work won first prize. These small victories reminded Owen that he wasn't just changing their lives, they were changing his, too. For the first time in years, Owen felt a sense of purpose beyond the courtroom. He wasn't just a judge anymore, he was a father. And with every step they took together, he became more certain that this was where he was meant to be. The decision to foster Isaiah and Malachi had brought Owen a profound sense of purpose, but it also came with challenges he hadn't anticipated. As the boys settled more comfortably into their new home, they began to let their guards down. With that came moments of vulnerability, but also moments of frustration, fear, and unresolved trauma. One evening, as Owen returned home from the courthouse, he was greeted by an unusual tension in the air. Malachi was sitting on the couch, his arms crossed and his expression stormy, while Isaiah sat at the dining table, hunched over a sketchpad but barely drawing. The silence between them was palpable. "What's going on?" Owen asked, setting his briefcase down. Malachi shrugged without looking up. "Nothing." Isaiah didn't speak but tightened his grip on the pencil in his hand. Owen could sense that nothing meant something, and he wasn't about to let it fester. "All right," Owen said, taking a seat on the armrest of the couch. "If nothing is bothering you, then it should be easy to tell me what's really going on." Malachi scowled. "Why do you care? You're just gonna make up some rule about it." Owen raised an eyebrow. "Try me." Isaiah sighed, his voice barely above a whisper. "We had a fight. Malachi thinks I shouldn't trust people so easily." Malachi jumped in, his tone defensive. "Because every time we do, they let us down. How many times do we have to get hurt before you figure that out?" The words hit Owen like a punch. He realized Malachi wasn't just angry, he was scared. Trust was something the boys had rarely been able to afford, and even now, in the safety of Owen's home, Malachi's instinct was to protect himself and his brother. "Malachi," Owen said gently, "trust doesn't come easily, I know. And you've had more reasons than most to be cautious. But it's okay to let people in, too." Malachi's eyes flashed with defiance. "What if they leave? What if it all goes away? Then what?" Owen's heart ached at the boy's raw vulnerability. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Then you'll still have each other. And you'll still have me. I know I can't promise the world, but I can promise this, I'm not going anywhere. I chose this, Malachi. I chose you and Isaiah, and I'll keep choosing you every day." Malachi didn't respond immediately, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. Owen let the silence linger, giving the boy space to process his emotions. Eventually, Malachi stood and walked toward Isaiah, sitting down beside him. "Sorry I yelled," he muttered. Isaiah gave him a small smile. "It's okay." The moment was far from perfect, but it was progress. Owen felt a flicker of hope as he watched them begin to mend their rift. He knew this wouldn't be the last time they clashed, but he was determined to help them navigate these challenges together. Later that week, another test of their trust came in an unexpected form. The boys had a school project that required parental involvement, a presentation about what makes a family. Isaiah had been excited about it, eager to show off his drawing skills, but Malachi had been less enthusiastic. "Why do we even have to do this?" Malachi grumbled as they sat at the kitchen table working on the project. "It's not like anyone cares what we think." "I care," Owen said, taking a seat beside them. "And I think this is a great opportunity to show everyone how strong you two are." Malachi rolled his eyes but didn't argue. Isaiah began sketching their family on a large poster board, drawing himself, Malachi, and Owen standing together in front of their house. Owen watched as he carefully added details, from the flowers in the front yard to the birdhouse they had built together. When the day of the presentation arrived, Owen took the morning off work to attend. He sat in the back of the classroom as the boys took turns presenting their projects. When it was Isaiah and Malachi's turn, they stood together at the front of the room, their poster propped on an easel. "This is our family," Isaiah began, his voice clear and confident. "It's me, my brother Malachi, and Mr. Mercer, our foster dad." Owen's heart swelled at the words, but what came next made it even harder to keep his composure. "We didn't have a home for a long time," Isaiah continued. "But now we do. And it's not just about the house, it's about feeling safe. That's what makes a family." Malachi, who had been fidgeting nervously, added, "Yeah, and he makes great pancakes." "That counts too, right?" The class laughed, and even Isaiah smiled. Owen felt a wave of pride as the boys finished their presentation and returned to their seats. They had come so far in such a short time, and their courage in sharing their story left him speechless. After school, Owen treated them to ice cream to celebrate. As they sat on a park bench, licking their cones and watching the sun dip below the horizon, Isaiah turned to Owen. "Do you really think we're a family?" he asked. Owen met his gaze, his voice steady. "I don't think it, Isaiah. I know it. Family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to stand by you, no matter what. And I choose you and Malachi every day." Isaiah smiled, his eyes shimmering with emotion. "We choose you too." As they sat together, the warmth of their connection felt like a shield against the challenges that lay ahead. Owen knew there would be more obstacles, but in that moment, he felt certain they could face anything together. The day of the final hearing for Owen's foster application had arrived, and the tension in the house was palpable. Isaiah and Malachi had been quieter than usual all morning, and even Owen, usually calm under pressure, found himself pacing the kitchen as he sipped his coffee. This hearing wasn't just a formality, it was the culmination of months of hard work, patience, and hope. "Are we gonna have to talk in court?" Malachi asked, breaking the silence as he sat at the kitchen table. Owen paused mid-step and turned to him. "No, not unless you want to," he said. "The judge might ask how you feel about living here, but it's up to you how much you share." Isaiah, who had been quietly sketching, set down his pencil. "What if they say no?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Owen walked over and knelt beside the table, his hands resting on the edge as he looked at both boys. "I won't let that happen," he said firmly. "We've worked hard to show the court that this is where you belong. No matter what, we'll face it together. Deal?" Malachi nodded slowly, and Isaiah gave a small, tentative smile. "Deal," they said in unison. At the courthouse, Owen felt a familiar sense of focus settle over him. The courtroom was a place he knew well, but today, it felt different. Today, he wasn't there as a judge but as a man fighting for the two boys who had become his family. The hearing began with the social worker, Ms. Delgado, presenting her findings. She spoke about the boys' history, their adjustment to living with Owen, and her observations during home visits. "It's clear to me," she concluded, "that Mr. Mercer has provided a stable, loving environment for Isaiah and Malachi. I fully support his application to foster them." The judge, a stern-looking woman with kind eyes, nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Ms. Delgado. Now, I'd like to hear from Mr. Mercer." Owen stood and approached the bench, his heart pounding. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves swirling inside him, "I've spent most of my career making decisions about other people's lives. But this is the most important decision I've ever made, not as a judge, but as a person. Isaiah and Malachi have brought joy and purpose to my life in ways I never expected. They're not just two boys who needed a home, they're my family." The judge's expression softened slightly, but she remained focused. "Mr. Mercer, fostering two children is a significant responsibility. How do you plan to continue balancing your demanding career with their needs?" "I've made adjustments to my work schedule," Owen said. "I've prioritized being present for them, attending their school events, helping with homework, and simply being there when they need me. I'm committed to giving them the stability they deserve." The judge nodded and turned to the boys. "Isaiah, Malachi, would either of you like to share how you feel about living with Mr. Mercer?" Isaiah hesitated for a moment, then stood. His voice was soft but steady. "Living with Mr. Mercer has been the best thing that's ever happened to us," he said. "He makes us feel safe, and he cares about what we think. He's not just a foster parent, he's our dad." Malachi, always more confident, grinned as he stood beside his brother. "Yeah, what Isaiah said. Plus, he makes the best pancakes. You can't beat that." The courtroom chuckled, and even the judge's lips curved into a small smile. "Thank you, Boys, she said. You may sit down. After a brief pause, the judge looked over the documents in front of her. The silence in the room felt heavy, and Owen held his breath as she began to speak. After reviewing the case and hearing from all parties, it's clear to me that this arrangement has been beneficial for everyone involved. Mr. Mercer has demonstrated his ability to provide a stable, loving home for Isaiah and Malachi. Therefore, I approve his application to foster them. Relief washed over Owen as the judge's words sank in. Isaiah and Malachi turned to him, their faces lighting up with joy. They rushed to his side, and Owen wrapped them both in a tight hug, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "We did it." The ride home was filled with laughter and excited chatter. The boys talked about celebrating with pizza and a movie, their energy infectious. For the first time in months, Owen felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The fight wasn't over, there was still the possibility of formal adoption in the future, but this was a huge step forward. That evening, as they sat on the couch watching a superhero movie, Malachi suddenly turned to Owen. "So, does this mean we're officially a family now?" he asked. Owen smiled, ruffling Malachi's hair. "We've been a family for a while now," he said. "Today just made it official." Isaiah leaned against Owen's shoulder, his sketchpad resting on his lap. "Thanks for not giving up on us," he said softly. Owen's throat tightened, and he placed an arm around both boys. "Never," he said. "You're stuck with me now." As the credits rolled on the screen and the boys dozed off, Owen sat back, letting the moment sink in. He had spent his life chasing justice in the courtroom, but this, being their father, was the most meaningful victory of all. Life settled into a new rhythm after the court officially approved Owen as Isaiah and Malachi's foster parent. The once quiet house was now a lively home, filled with laughter, occasional sibling squabbles, and the steady hum of a family finding its way. Owen had never imagined himself in this role, but now he couldn't picture his life any other way. One evening, a few weeks after the hearing, Owen came home to find Isaiah and Malachi in the backyard. Isaiah was sitting under the old oak tree, sketchbook in hand, while Malachi was trying, and failing, to hang a makeshift basketball hoop on the garage. Owen chuckled as he watched the scene from the window, a deep sense of contentment settling over him. "Need a hand, Malachi?" Owen called out as he stepped outside. Malachi turned, grinning. "Only if you can reach higher than me, old man." Owen smirked. "Watch and learn." Grabbing the hoop, he secured it to the garage wall with ease. Malachi let out an exaggerated groan. All right, you win this round." As they played a quick game of one-on-one, Isaiah joined in, laughing as Malachi tried to block Owen's surprisingly skilled shots. For a moment, the three of them were just a regular family, their worries replaced by the simplicity of the game. Later, after dinner, Owen called the boys into the living room. "I have something to discuss with you," he said, his tone serious but warm. Malachi flopped onto the couch. "What's up? We in trouble?" "No," Owen said with a chuckle. "I've been thinking about the future, our future. Fostering you two has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. But I'd like to take it one step further." Isaiah and Malachi exchanged a glance, curiosity lighting their faces. "I want to adopt you," Owen said. "Not just as your foster parent, but as your dad. Officially and permanently." The room fell silent for a moment before Malachi broke into a wide grin. "You mean we'd be your real kids? Like, forever?" "Forever," Owen confirmed. "If that's what you want." Isaiah's eyes shimmered with tears, and he nodded quickly. "We want that," he said, his voice trembling. "We really want that." Malachi sat up straight, his usual bravado softened by emotion. "Yeah. Let's do it." Over the next few months, Owen began the adoption process, working closely with Hazel and Ms. Delgado to navigate the legal steps. The boys were involved every step of the way, from signing forms to picking out outfits for the final court date. They were excited but also nervous, their hope tempered by the memories of disappointment from their past. When the day of the adoption hearing arrived, Owen could feel the tension in the air. The boys were unusually quiet as they got ready, adjusting their ties and double-checking their appearances. "You look great," Owen assured them. "Both of you." The courtroom was smaller than the one where Owen worked, but it felt just as significant. The boys sat beside Owen as the judge reviewed the paperwork. She was a kind woman with a warm smile, and she addressed the boys directly. "Isaiah, Malachi," she said, "do you understand what it means to be adopted by Mr. Mercer?" Isaiah nodded. "It means he'll be our dad," he said quietly. "For real?" "That's right," the judge said. "And is that what you want?" "Yes," Isaiah said. "More than anything." Malachi added, "Yeah. He's already our dad, but this makes it official, right?" The judge smiled. "Exactly." She turned to Owen. "Mr. Mercer, are you prepared to take on the responsibilities of fatherhood for these two boys, permanently and unconditionally?" "I am," Owen said, his voice steady. "They're already my sons in every way that matters." The judge nodded, her gavel coming down with a soft tap. "Then it's my honor to approve this adoption. Congratulations, you're officially a family." The boys erupted into cheers, and Owen pulled them into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the moment. As they left the courtroom, a photographer snapped their picture, Owen in the center, flanked by his two grinning sons. It was a moment they would treasure forever. That evening, they celebrated with pizza, ice cream, and a family movie night. Malachi sprawled across the couch, his head resting on Owen's shoulder, while Isaiah worked on a new drawing at the coffee table. "What are you working on?" Owen asked, peeking over his shoulder. Isaiah held up the sketch, a detailed drawing of their family standing in front of the house, complete with the birdhouse they had built together. Above the picture, in bold letters, he had written, "The Mercers." "It's perfect," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like us." Malachi looked over and grinned. "Does this mean we have to listen to you now? You're officially the boss." Owen laughed. "Nice try, but I've always been the boss." As the boys laughed and teased, Owen leaned back, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. His life had taken a turn he never expected, but it was better than he ever could have imagined. Isaiah and Malachi had brought joy, purpose, and love into his world, and he was ready to spend the rest of his life giving them the same in return. Together, they had built something extraordinary, a family that would endure no matter what. This story is a heartfelt reminder that family is not always defined by blood but by the choices we make and the love we share. Owen's journey from a solitary judge to a devoted father illustrates the transformative power of compassion and the courage it takes to embrace change. Isaiah and Malachi's resilience and trust in Owen show that even in the face of hardship, the hope for connection and belonging can lead to profound healing. The adoption not only formalizes their bond but also symbolizes the triumph of love over the uncertainty and pain of the boys' past. It's a testament to the idea that family is built through dedication, patience, and mutual support. Owen's determination to provide a home for the twins is inspiring, showing that when we open our hearts to others, we often find a deeper purpose in our own lives. This is a story of redemption, second chances, and the unshakable bond of family, a narrative that reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for hope and new beginnings. It leaves readers with a profound sense of warmth and inspiration, proving that the love we choose to give can change lives forever.